So I think we'll go over some different things, basically, especially, people that are new and just to make it a bit easier. Um, the idea, especially with Buddhist practice, as I've talked at other times, is beginning to look inward. In fact, I saw a funny thing come up on one of Lama Yeshu's thing. They must have taken him to Disneyland or Disney World, and he was in front of a place that said inner space. So we're all interested with outer space, but really the Buddhist practice is learning inner space, and the reason behind that is because the answers lie within us. Okay, so that basically, within the Buddhist practice, the first teaching Buddha gave, which was talking about the truth of suffering, of dissatisfaction, is the fact that we're all, dissatisfied on some level. So there's very different levels of what, he used the word, or he didn't use it because he didn't speak English, but it's been translated to use the word suffering. So suffering is the easy one, because that's in terminology would be called suffering of suffering, because that's when we hurt ourselves. We know we're suffering, or when we get sick, we're suffering. We realize that. Everybody says, I know that. I don't want to be suffering, and things. And so actually, that's the suffering. The second one is what's called the suffering of change, and that's because we create for ourselves the concept of what we want to acquire outside of ourselves in order to bring happiness to ourselves, which is absolutely fine. The problem is that our mind doesn't interact with what we acquire for ourselves. And the reason that happens is that our mind is deluded in the sense that it overestimates what it's getting. So if I get this, then I'm going to be happy, and that's all I need. Okay. In reality, we know that doesn't work. That's what's called the suffering of change, because it's bringing us some bit of temporal happiness, but it's not bringing us what we're really looking for, which is the ultimate happiness. And so, if we acquire the things, if we go with our life and we understand, what Buddha also taught was all these things are impermanent, which means that, we only spend brief times with them, but we grasp onto it. Oh, I have to have this for my happiness. I have to keep this. And so because of that, we're unreasonable. We're not dealing with reality. If we deal with reality and we understand that I can acquire something and enjoy it, but it's not going to be forever, then we have a proper type of relationship, with what goes on around ourselves. So even from the standpoint of, we think, oh my God, I need to go to this restaurant for my favorite meal, okay, and that's bringing me back happiness. Well, we know it, with the previous type of logic, to acquire this, the more you eat, the happier you should be. But that doesn't work. We overeat, we get sick. And so, so what happens is that we didn't deal with it. We didn't deal with it really on a proper level, in a sense. If we deal with it on a proper level and are very mindful and enjoy our food, taste our food, swallow our food, feel the nutrition of our food, there's not real repercussions, in a sense. But when we grasp, I have to have this, and then there's that letdown because we overestimated the happiness it was going to bring. Instead of seeing it as temporal happiness, we see it as being more than that. That's the extreme, going to that extreme. The other one, which is the much more difficult one to understand, is translated as pervasive suffering, pervasive dissatisfaction. What that means is that while we don't have control of our mind, while we don't understand, everything about ourselves, within ourselves, who we are, what we are, then there's always going to be something. There's always going to be something there. I think we've talked about it in the other talks. To me, that's the one that's kind of like that scratch on your new car. That there's always something there. Okay, so the funny thing about that one is that there's always some spark of intelligence within us that knows that everything is not 100% right. And so, we can't design the world around us and make it perfect. So that's always the interesting story about the life of the Buddha. I'll give my little version of it and things. So Buddha was brought up in India, and when when the mother was pregnant, the father was a king of the particular area. So and so they had the religious person come to them. And he told him, he said, if he can either go one of two ways, he's either going to become one of the greatest kings and be able to rule the entire world, or he's going to become a very spiritual leader in the world. Okay, one of those two. So of course the father's a king. He's got all these different things. He doesn't want him to go into a spiritual life and things, and go into some kind of monastery or whatever it might be. He wants him to become the great king and rule the kingdom that will be his destiny. So what the king did is that he had basically all the different type of people working within that palace continuously cutting flowers before they died. So it's almost like the way we live in the West here. The way we live in the West here, we're kind of isolated from reality. We don't really see the type of sickness and old age and death so much. We, the older people, we put them away, and sick people are, put someplace. But when you live in the Far East, you live in a place like India especially, and you see cremations going on all the time. And I've woken up in a train station, where I was stuck overnight, and the person, very close to me had died during that night. Just because of starvation, and you see the thousands of people. So the majority of the world lives in a situation that is not necessarily so sterile as the Western world, especially as the U.S. and things. And so because of that, the king was trying to create an environment that was totally unnatural. So Buddha was known as Prince Siddhartha. So Prince Siddhartha basically was, growing up, getting a little older, and he kept thinking, something doesn't seem right. There's something that's not exactly correct here. I don't know what it is, but it's not correct. So, of course, he had the guy that attended to him, and of course, they didn't have cars, so he'd go out onto the chariot, and they snuck out. He had him sneak out at night. Not at night, but after the hours, and got outside. And as they were going, they run by somebody who was very, very old. And Buddha said to the chariot, who is that? What is that? Well, that's a person that's aged. Okay. And Buddha said, does everybody get like that? Yes, everybody becomes like that. Goes by somebody else, and there's somebody with, like, whether it was leprosy or what, sickness, same thing. Does everybody get that? Yeah, everybody does. Goes by somebody else, they're having a funeral thing, and there's death. So he basically went out and saw that there's, sickness, death, and so he realizes that there's birth, sickness, old age, death. This is the cycle, basically cycle of life. And so it made him think, well, then what's the meaning of life? What is the real, what is the real meaning of life? So, so basically, what that did is that became the little spark that said he needed to go out and find some answers. So he didn't know how to look within, so he had to go look without and find different religious people and try different things, and to try to find himself. Eventually, the story is that in what's now known as Bodh Gaya, so Bodhi means awakened, means enlightened. He sat under the tree for 6 years there, and sat until his mind awakened, until his mind opened up. So basically, the answers lie within ourselves, and he was able to find that and things because he realized there's no way we can set everything up, and as I said, all of these things by nature are dissatisfactory. Okay, so when we sit, when we use meditation and we sit there quietly. There's different types of meditation. So one of the first ones, in this case, we can use like the object of the breath, which is, to use that as your focal point for your mind. What we find is that our mind is all over the place. So there's this whole other thing. You probably have it here somewhere, the wheel of life. I don't know if you have that picture someplace in your house here, but it basically shows that if the mind is uncontrolled, it's like a wild elephant. But then at the end of the wheel of life, as you go through this, it shows that taming that elephant, when you learn to work with your mind, learn to work with your energy. So the mind is awareness. That's what knows, and the nature of that is clear and knowing. It's clarity. That's what's actually there, is clarity that's there. As we know things, when we know them wrongly, those are what's called the kind of delusions, because we first begin to draw wrong concepts and limited concepts about ourselves, and based off of that limited concepts about ourselves, that's how we create our vision of the world and what we're going to go after. So I'm going to go after all this stuff and grasp at it, and I'm going to push all that stuff away. But within the nature of that stuff and that stuff, there's actually no difference except for our programming. We've programmed ourselves. We did it. We programmed ourselves to say, I like this, I like that. There's nothing inherent within those different objects themselves that said that they're, more to be grasped at than these to be pushed away. And then there's the third one, which is the one that's called indifference. Indifference is the foggy state of mind, or the one that just is undecided, like, oh, here's a new person, and I don't know anything about him, so I don't like him and I don't dislike him. Okay. When we deal with, people with, we see how many times in our lifetime, if we look back, our best friends have become our enemies. Our enemies have become our friends. Why? Because we have a self-grasping at a fixed view about ourselves, a very fixed view. This is who I am, and so this is exactly what I like. And, then we create what we want to grasp after and what we want to push away. And this is what we kind of circle through our day. Our day, we go through this all the time. So what do we do then? Well, the easy thing is we're in the West here, so it's very easy. We can basically, we can put on a TV show. Now we've got Netflix. We've got Amazon, Prime or whatever. And then we got Hulu and we got all these other things. We've got the radio to be listening to. So that we've been taught to not look within ourselves in the Western world. We have not spent any quiet time. So to begin with the sitting of meditation, and you begin to learn to sit with yourself. If you can learn to become quiet and sit within yourself, you begin to see that it's not necessary to be grasping after all these other things, pushing all these other things away. So that constant dissatisfactory feeling within is not there because your mind is getting to a state of quiet. Now, when you're meditating, that first form of meditation, which is called shamatha in Sanskrit, and Tibetan word is shine, really means mental calm. So we begin to work with our nature, our mind's nature truly is calm, is quiet. Okay, so when we learn to go into that quiet, when we learn to realize that even when there's 30-foot waves because of a hurricane, that if you go down into that depth of that ocean, there's calm and clear. The depth inside of our own mind is calm and clear. And by the way, because it's calm and clear and so quiet, it's very satisfied, rather than the dissatisfied state that we're always in. It's the kind of uncomfortableness that we do when we stand into a elevator with other people. We haven't become comfortable, within our own skin. So the practice of meditation is beginning to say, well, wow, there's a lot I don't know about myself. Okay, so then you begin to sit, and you sit quiet, and you just become aware of what's going on. Now, I have to say that there's a lot of people that want to talk about things like no thought, because I've got so many thoughts. Well, first of all, the problem is not the thoughts. The problem is, how are we dealing with the thoughts? If our mind is in a state of quiet, we can be around a lot of noise and it doesn't bother us at all, right? We've all had that, when our mind is in a state of quiet. When you're in a state of quiet of meditation, you can be in a state of no thoughts sometimes. But all of a sudden, part of our mind's nature is movement, is energy, is creativity. And because of that, there could become, there could become thoughts, there could be different things that happen. But we're learning to be able to find the silence within the noise. Okay, that's what happens with our meditation. We sit with ourselves, and we let things arise, and before you know it, because they're impermanent, these things are impermanent, they're gone before you know it. They're like the clouds in the sky. The clouds in the sky are not part of the sky. But because of moisture and different wind and different things, clouds form, and then they dissolve back into the sky. The sky is always clear. The space is always clear. As I've talked before, without space we can't move. So space is always there. We are able to find our inner space. We're able to become aware as well of what's going on around us. So, when we talk about, things with teaching with children and things like that, learning, to sit there, we might go into a room with kids, and the kids might be all loud and screaming and things like that, and we might have a more mature attitude and think they're just kids and it's fine. But then we might have some kids that are very frustrated because they don't like that. They're not used to it. They come from a quieter family or something, whatever it might be. But the fact is that our mind is going to deal with things, all the time. So when we sit down and we're sitting in meditation and we begin to sit quiet and we begin to feel, a sense of quiet and calm, and then all of a sudden something else happens and thoughts start to take place, we start to grasp back at that quiet space. But we don't need to grasp back at that quiet space. We just need to reflect what's happening the way a mirror reflects without discriminating. When we look in the mirror's not saying, oh, you got an ugly face, or that's pretty, or that's this or that. It just reflects. Our mind just reflects. What happens after that is the habit formation that we've created. That's what's called karma. So karma, if it was translated, would be law of cause and effect. Because we create these imprints onto our mind, which become the clouds that block these stars and the sky and things, these things begin to reinvent themselves. They would, I don't know, the word would be right, refract almost something, because what happens is that every time I reinforce that this is me and I like that and I don't like that, and because I like that, I'm going to grasp after that, and because I don't like that, I'm going to have an aversion for that. That energy creates habits. So it's very difficult for us. We have to learn. We need something powerful in order to deal with the energy of our habits. We've got all bad habits, all based on diluted ideas. So the idea of the meditation is to begin and create some space within that. It all of a sudden puts us into a quiet space that gives us that moment or two to deal with what comes about and realize that, oh, it's actually not that bad, or that's not all that good, and we just reflect it. Our mind becomes the mirror. And what happens then? That's what begins to create an earthquake within ego's world. Okay, so in the West, we use ego pretty loosely, and it's quite often used and probably intertwined more with somebody's, let's say, bad emotion of pride. Somebody's very prideful. But actually, in Buddhism, ego or non-ego is the truth. Means that there's not a fixed entity within ourselves to be found that has to be this way. It's learning the truth, about ourselves. Learning that our mind itself has awareness, has openness, and the interesting thing is that is our nature. So when we go on some trips and we get a chance to relax and things, especially when we're within nature, when we go out and we're in the mountains or by the ocean, the outside elements talk to our inside elements, and we feel, we can feel something, we can feel, really kind of more at peace because it's more natural. So something starts to happen to us that usually would create that reaction to us, but it doesn't at that time. If we had to react to it the way that we think that it's a fixed formula for us, then it should be that way all the time. But we begin to learn that that our mind has a different way of dealing with things as long as we begin to start learning about our mind. So the meditation practice is more or less learning to sit there. What comes up as far as thoughts, what comes up as feelings, things. Even when we're sitting there, not talking about, necessarily with legs falling asleep, but even with, what we feel as different things as being pain In actuality, it's only energy. We labeled it pain, and we react to it. So when we react to it, we're sending all these, energy that's fighting, that begins to fight inside here, kind of pushing away. If we just learn to just look at it, become aware of it, that energy changing, because nothing's standing still. It's changing every moment anyway. That we can't stop. It's going to change every moment. But we also begin to learn, once we get into more esoteric practices and things, we can also learn to, send relaxed energy in, because besides having our 3 main channels, we have thousands of other channels which kind of mirror our nervous system, but they're psychic channels, okay? And so within them, we can send more subtle energy, some more subtle wind. So energy is kind of, is like, wind energy, like our breath. We have a subtle breath within ourselves. So even when you're in meditation, there'll become times when you can be so quiet that your breath is not perceptible at that time. It can become so quiet, but there's breathing going on, but it's a more subtle level. So we can begin to learn with the more subtle level. We can also learn how to, begin to heal ourselves, because psychosomatic is what's creating the majority of our problems. Okay? So we can go beyond that. So I'll leave it for now. Maybe if you have any kind of question for any of that, I'd be happy to answer that. Otherwise, I'll leave it for right now if there's a question. If not, we'll shut it off. Any question from him? No? Okay.
I was thinking when you started about this beautiful movie about the Buddha in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot Sleep. No, it's not Sleep is in Seattle, but what was with Keanu Reeves?
Oh yeah,
Buddha, I think.
yeah, Siddhartha or something. Yeah,
it's a beautiful story.
Yeah. I haven't seen it for a long time, but
I was just thinking I have to watch it again.
Yeah, no, it's
an extremely good movie.
Yeah,
and the story very well.
Yeah, no, it's quite good. I agree. Also, the book, which I haven't read for many years, Siddhartha, which is not exactly, the whole thing of the Buddha, because, Siddhartha in that book more or less was one that he left his family and, went on to a kind of spiritual life, but then he left the spiritual life and got married and then he came back again to it and things. So. No, it's not the true not the actual story of Buddha, but the book itself was actually a good. It's a good book.
I know. I just made it in my mind. I have to watch this movie again this week.
Yeah.
So it's on my list.
Netflix. They have a Netflix TV show Buddha.
Correct.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And that one, I started watching it, but then I noticed there was like 40 or 100 different episodes. So 200. I didn't get I don't think I got past 30 or something.
When you do watch those shows, it kind of presents, at least for me, it just really reflects meditational experience.
Yeah.
And it's on Netflix. I bought these DVDs, but on Netflix they have this.
Yeah, that's where I was watching it. Was on Netflix, and then I was thinking, wow, this keeps going on. So I went to take a look at how many episodes, and I didn't remember. I just know that there were a lot.
200.
Yeah.
It goes fast.
What's it called?
Buddha.
Just Buddha? Mm-hmm. On Netflix?
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
I can definitely watch that. A few episodes.
Yeah. So one last thing, especially with, you're working with children and things, even when you're not, let's say, getting into, it doesn't need to be judged. So any level of beginning to sit quietly a little bit with some self, and that kind of reflectiveness is very good and very important. That stuff didn't happen, at least for me, I'm sure for most of us in our lifetime, with what you do with the schools now. So that's that's fantastic, that there's, introduce some different things and, really allows the people to be able to, look inward some more. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you.